And with that, I want to introduce our guest today, Charlie Denson. Charlie Denson, he's the president and chief executive officer of Anini Vista Advisors. He graduated with a degree in marketing from here at USU and spent more than 30 years with Nike, including as Nike brand president from 2001 to 2013, where he oversaw all aspects of one of the best-known brands in the world. Denson was a driving force in Nike's global presence, pioneering Nike's growth in China, India, and Brazil in particular. He's a big supporter of Utah State and loves spending time with students. So please help me welcome a great Aggie, Charlie Denson.
Thanks very much. Charlie, thank you. Charlie's our first repeat guest because he's my favorite guest for Leadership Forum. And in his honor, I'm wearing...
You get a new pair of shoes every time you get it.
A new pair of shoes. Which he talked about 2 years ago when he was here, so I had to go and buy them. And they are the most comfortable shoes I've ever owned. So we're going to talk a lot about Nike today, but let me just start with what you're doing now. You're currently the chairman of Teneo Sports, and people like Michael Jordan and LeBron James are some of your clients. So what is Teneo Sports, and what's your role as a chairman?
Yeah, I think, well, what happened was when I retired from Nike, there. That work? There we go. And you know, when you spend your entire career at one place and it comes time to walk away, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. Well, I thought I knew what I was going to do. Join a couple of boards, play a little golf, spend more time with the kids and the family. As always, the plans don't always work out the way you think. But one of the things through a good friend of mine who worked with us at Nike for a long time and worked in Bill Clinton's Oval Office administration, went to work for a small group of guys in New York that were starting a small consultancy group, and introduced me. And it's a very dynamic group, and it's a group it's a small boutique agency that targets just Fortune 100 CEOs as their target market. And so they asked me to join them to start a little bit more of a sports enterprise with them. And we started with, guys like Michael and Kobe and LeBron and these guys, they're not really clients. They actually were more advisors. I've known all those guys for a long time. And I went to those guys and said, hey, if, we're thinking about trying to set up a practice that helps high-profile athletes not do endorsement deals, not do, employment contracts and things like that, but really to build their own personal brand and with that do business development for them. And that's really where it started. We've been doing some of it. It has not, obviously Michael, Jordan is the benchmark right now for that type of enterprise. Nike does all of his work for him, basically. So Michael doesn't need that work. Kobe is probably one of the smartest athletes I've ever met, and has that same drive that makes him a great basketball player. He's going to be great in the world of business as well. And then LeBron's still playing, and LeBron is really taking the model today and building his. LeBron's going to end up being the most successful business person as an athlete, at least in our generation. Somebody else will probably surpass him. But, he's already involved in media. He's involved in restaurants. He's involved in all kinds of different companies. And so he's got a whole nother world that he's building as he continues to, play the game of basketball. So that's what that was. As it's evolved, I do as much work with them now, just advising some of their corporate clients, in the world of sports and how they interact, whether it's doing a contract with the NFL or the NBA, or whether they want to create a brand relationship with an athlete, whether it's here in the United States or or internationally. So I spend, I don't spend a ton of time with them, a couple days a week at the most. But it's a great point for me to stay connected to. They're a huge resource base for me, just individually.
Yeah.
And they know a lot of people, so it's good.
That's great. So let me then take you back. You spent 35 years with Nike, but if we can go back even further, when
I could barely remember that long.
I'll remind you.
Okay.
So we hear when we talk to employers and some of our corporate partners also the importance of work as something that they're looking for when they're looking at recruiting students. So let's go back to the Denson Feed and Seed in Corvallis. When did you work there, and what were some of the lessons that you learned there?
So Dave's referring to, I grew up in a family business. It was a family retail business, and in a town actually very, very similar to Logan. Corvallis, Oregon, had Oregon State University's there, ag school, very, very similar curriculum to what the Utah State environment is here in Logan. And we had a retail store. It was a feed and seed store. And so that was my first exposure to the world of business. At the age of 12, I was head warehouse maintenance director. And so which translated to my dad telling me to sweep the warehouse every morning. And but no, what I did learn about profit and loss, customer service, all the real basics of running a business. And ironically, I used a lot of those learnings when I was running a $23 billion enterprise at Nike. I mean, there's a lot of basics that go into business at every level. And so that was one of the biggest learnings that, still sticks with me today.
Yeah. So from Corvallis, you came to Utah State. You played football here. We hear also from employers a lot about a bias for hiring student athletes. Have you seen that in your career? And what is it? What are those qualities about athletes that make them so attractive for employers? And are those qualities something that anybody can learn without having been an athlete?
Yeah, I think, obviously at Nike, athletics was our world. So if you had an athletic background, you might have potentially had a leg up on somebody else that maybe didn't. But I wouldn't say necessarily that it was a mandate or it was anything that was a requirement. I think what athletics did for me personally, and I can only speak for myself, is it teaches you a lot of things that are very comparable to the business world. It teaches you what leadership's all about. It teaches you, what discipline's all about, and strategy is all about. It teaches you how to play on a team, and there's a time, for you to perform individually, and then there's a time that maybe, you need to, step back and play a role, on that's part of a team. So there's a lot of things that I think, transcend just the world of athletics and the world of sport into the world of business. Do you have to be an athlete to be successful? No. I think some of the most competitive people I know, probably never were on an athletic field after the age of 15, and yet they're still incredibly competitive. And certainly, the two characteristics that I always looked for when I was interviewing people, was their competitiveness and their curiosity. And I think, and in a lot of ways, curiosity trumped even competitiveness, because curiosity in kind of that quest to always consider something else or something different is really valuable. And what I loved to have around me were people that were always questioning what if, whether it was what if I'm right or wrong, or what if the consumer is right or wrong, or what if the inventor, or whatever it was. But that characteristic of curiosity I found over years and years of working in the corporate world, where things can get incredibly stagnant incredibly quickly and easily. to be a very, very strong indicator of how successful somebody was going to be.
After Utah State, you went back to Oregon, and you started with Nike as an assistant store manager at one of their first retail stores. This was 79 or so?
Yep.
What was Nike like back then?
Small. I think, we were a private company. It was really just a bunch of ex-athletes kind of, selling shoes out of, small stores, and Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman were very much involved. Obviously, I think my first employee number was 101 or 103, I think it was. So it was, everybody knew everybody. It was a very community-based, every Friday we would all go over and, at the end of the week and meet at the home office and, we would just exchange information and stories. It was very informal. But, you go back to that competitive thing. I've been around some of the greatest athletes of our generation, and Phil Knight is probably every bit as competitive as any one of them. And so, his personality certainly set the tone for the culture of the company. And even back when I think when I started, Nike was doing about $75 million a year. So we were a substantial business at that time. As local businesses go, we certainly weren't anywhere near what they are today. But a lot of what drives the company today was established in those early years, and a lot of it stemmed from Phil's own personality, which was highly competitive and highly collaborative. He ran on a track team that was chronicled as one of probably the least talented yet winningest track teams in the history of college track and field. Bowerman was the coach, and he got an incredible amount of performance out of those kids, and Knight was one of those kids, and he used that learning to set many of the cornerstones of the company's culture today.
Yeah. If you're curious about what Charlie just talked about, I would recommend you read a book called Shoe Dog, and it's really Phil's story that you talked about. That competitiveness really comes out in that book. You can just read it. So
yeah, it's a great book. He wrote it. It's not a ghostwriter. It's not a. He spent a lot of time, going over every single word. It's a really easy read. You can read it. You can read it a day or two. It's an easy read, and yet it's pretty enlightening.
Yeah.
It's a good book.
So 101 or so employees, and then when you left, about how many employees did Nike have?
Oh God, I don't know. We probably had 150,000 employees directly employed, and then Nike works off of a contractor base as far as the manufacturing. So they're not considered direct employees, but we had probably close to 2 million people working on Nike products, worldwide from a manufacturing standpoint. So yeah, it was a little bit bigger then.
Yeah. So can you go through, you went through a series of positions at Nike from assistant store manager. Can you take us through your thought process as you grew in the company?
Yeah, I think in the early days, and you referred to Phil's book, and he talks a lot about it. They called them the butt face meetings, because the senior team would literally go away for 3 or 4 days, and they would just challenge each other. And again, that was Knight's way of kind of getting the best out of the team, was that collective, knowledge, understanding, and competitiveness, to get to a kind of a future state. And so one of the things, they would do it every 6 months, and then literally they would come out and you would get a new job. And you might go from marketing to sales, or you might go from production, to administration. It was really, for somebody like me, it was a unbelievable opportunity to just get exposed to different facets of a fast-growing enterprise. And they would do it based on personalities. not necessarily based on intellectual backgrounds or anything. I mean, he talks a lot about, that in his book. A lot of the people that were very successful at Nike, and even to this day, don't necessarily work in their actual trained, areas of expertise. They've learned how to, use the resources that the company has been able to assemble, to make them successful. And it doesn't. I mean, we've got, people running marketing divisions that majored in psychology, or things like that. So it's Knight was an accountant by trade, but he was a competitor by philosophy, and so that's the way he ran it. So for me, I had started out in the retail stores. I grew up in a retail background. A kid that I grew up with hired me. We lived 3 doors away from each other. He ran track at University of Oregon. He was running the retail stores at the time. This is 1979. He had no clue about how to run a retail store, nor did I, actually. But I'd grown up in that world, so I got a chance to go to work for him. And I literally didn't think I was going to be there that long. At the time, the company was, literally run out of the back of a car, and that wasn't what I thought my career was going to be dependent on when I left school. And I always say to everybody, I told myself that I would do this for 3-4 years, and then I'd go out and get a real job. And fortunately for me, I really never had to go get a real job. And so I did that. I got an opportunity to go into what they now today call sports marketing, which is a really eloquent term for giving away free shoes to professional athletes, and which is what I did. And started in the world of baseball, and then worked in football here in the U.S. With the cleated, footwear, and I managed to convince people that because I played football in college, I was a great guy to give away free shoes to football players, and that's about as scientific as we got back in those days. And so I did that for a couple years, and that was my first exposure to really the world-class athletes. And this is back in the early 80s, and worked with Mike Schmidt, who was MVP of, the league, the National League, a couple years in a row, and the Phillies were in the World Series, and Steve Carlton, who won the Cy Young Award winner that same year, and Carlton Fisk in Boston, and it goes on and on and on with a lot of the baseball players. And then then I got into the football thing, and we were just introducing products. So we had situations where shoes were literally falling apart in the middle of the game. We had, I did a lot of explaining and a lot of apologizing back in those days. But the goal was always to make it better. And a lot of the athletes that we worked with at the time understood that. And that taught me the value of fulfilling the promise to the athlete, which is really what the company was built on. So that was a real frontline, opportunity to learn and quite frankly, really just gain confidence in, that approach. And then I got into the business end of the company, and went into customer service for a while, working with the sales reps, and I really enjoyed that job, and it was a piece of exposure for me that then led me to get into sales. And I was a sales rep for 10 or 11 years. And then went into sales administration and was a regional sales manager, and then became the national sales manager for the U.S. in, I think that was in early 90s maybe, which then led to the first opportunity to go abroad. And at the, Nike was now $6 billion, and it was obvious to me that the long-term growth of the company over at least my career span, a big part of it is going to be international. And so I'd never, at the time, even traveled outside the U.S., let alone worked outside the U.S. But I started to really think about and understand the value of having an international experience. And so once I became sales manager for the U.S., which was the biggest business, it started to open up doors, to talk about some of these other things. So I took a job in Europe, and my wife Trina and I moved to Amsterdam, and I got people asking me this question continuously for 6 months, why did I take that job? Because I was running a $6 billion sales organization in the U.S., and Europe was about $1.8 billion. And they said, why would you take that step backwards? And for me, I didn't see it as a step backwards at all. I actually saw it as a step into a whole different realm. And it was funny because I really was surprised at how many people challenged my thought process. At least my peer groups, the executives, that were, playing the chess game with the people. That conversation was an easy one. We were on the same page there. But that really opened up and truly did lead to me becoming the head of the Nike brand and things like that, because that's where I got a good dose of everything that I didn't know, and that was a good dose. We talk a lot today about diversity and diversity of thought, diversity of whether it's race, color, sexual orientation, whatever angle you want to apply the diversity piece to. Well, for me, being a white Anglo male in the U.S., diversity was kind of a foreign concept. And, for me moving to Europe, I always tell the story, the first meeting I ever walked into a meeting with the 27 different sales managers from every European country. So I walked into the meeting and, everybody's talking to everybody, and I don't hear a word of English. Everybody's talking in a foreign language, literally everybody. And now everybody spoke English, sometimes as a second or even third language. So a lot of times things could get misinterpreted very easily, very, very commonly, and quite frankly, sometimes completely misinterpreted, just because they didn't have command of the English language. They said something that they thought they meant. And so I had to learn how to adapt to that. And like I said, the first time I gave a talk to the group, I couldn't tell if they were smiling and telling their friend in German or Spanish or Italian, what's this clown think he's doing? It's a little unnerving at the time. But I got a good dose of that. And then I also realized that there's a lot of different ways to solve a problem, and that culture has a huge influence on the right ways and the wrong ways. And the way we solve problems here in the United States isn't always the best way to solve problems in other cultures around the world. And that was one of the biggest learnings that I took away from my experience. We lived there for 4 years. That really, I think, led to a lot of my success, when I ran the global operation.
So from there, obviously expansion into
So that was my 30-year career in
right.
less than 10 minutes.
Right.
I hope.
Well, so then into China and India and Brazil, very different cultures. So some of those cultural differences you talked about, but what did you find? What are the ties that bind all of the sports fans together?
Yeah, it was unique because, you could go from China to Brazil, where culturally, you probably can't get too far, on a spectrum to the edges between the two. And yet sport was, there's a lot of community in sport. There's a lot, and sport is a universal language. So we always used to say that we were very fortunate when you think about what are the universal languages of the world. Sport is one, religion can be one, and music. And that, we were participated in one of those universal languages, which really made globalization for us much, much easier. And it was ironic that you could go into a Nike office in Barcelona, Spain, in Tokyo, Japan, or in, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and it would have the same vibe, and yet there would be nuances that were different because the cultures would interpret competitiveness or innovation or collaboration differently, but they were based in the same principles. And it made it, and I think that's why, Nike as a corporate brand globally was able to grow as fast as they were around the world, is because they had that unique, universal language of sport that accelerated the growth and accelerated our ability to convey strategy, to talk about, collaboration, the way the culture of the company worked, things like that. And it was a big enabler for us. And it was really, really important in the way that we grew the company and accelerated our growth.
So then in 2001, you became president of Nike brand. Mm-hmm. And you did that until you retired in 2014. So 13 years at the top of, you could still say, one of the best known brands in the world.
Hope.
So what are some of the experiences out of those 13 years that stick out for you?
Oh boy. Well, there was a lot of good ones. I mean, we went from when I became president in 2001, we had not grown in 3 years, which was a bit of a problem, and we were at about 9.7 billion. And when I left in 2014, I think we were at 23 billion. So the growth was a good story. We did okay. The first 3 or 4 years was a real challenge because the U.S. business was in decline for only the second time in the history of the company. And there we had all kinds of problems. We had culture problems. We had strategy problems. We had brand problems. We were still suffering from significantly from the worker condition situation that really kind of enveloped the company in the mid to late 90s. We didn't really have a clear strategy and answer. We had to deal with that. We had kind of taken our eye off the ball around our product quality. We'd expanded around the world in so many different dimensions. It was, we had kind of created a sea of mediocrity. I always used to talk to Wall Street about one of the benefits of owning Nike stock was no company's bulletproof to recession or saturation or maturation for that matter. But one of the things that we always used to talk about with the investment world and the investment community was Nike's ability to actually change directions around what it focuses on. Because we actually look at the business through 4, 5, even 6 different dimensions in how we create our growth strategies. We can create them on a regional basis, so by geography. We can create them on a product type basis, apparel, footwear, and the accessory business. We can create strategies by gender, against the male consumer or the female consumer. We can do it by sport. We can say, what, the running business is going to get the resources now, and the basketball business is going to continue to grow. We can look at it through that prism. Today, they look at it even through the world of authentic sport versus culture, and a little bit more fashion oriented, and looking at it, in that. So that gave us the ability to create growth strategies annually that we could talk about not only with the investment community, but also with, it was a foundation to allow us to build our strategies and implement them around the world. And so that was probably the biggest, I think, achievement that I think that I'm proud of during that tenure, is we really, as a company, learned how to do that, and that really unlocked a lot of the growth. Because when you're running an enterprise that has that many different kids to feed, is the analogy we always used to use. Some kids needed a lot of protein. Some kids needed a little bit of a diet. Some kids needed, different things to be successful, and yet everybody wanted to be fed. And so trying to keep everybody invested in, the whole plan and the whole strategy, and yet still understanding what their role was and what the expectation was in playing that role, was what I did. That was what I did day to day, was trying to communicate, facilitate, the planning, the strategy, and all that stuff. And we got pretty good at it for quite a while. So that was one of the biggest takeaways. I think one of the biggest challenges is, when you look at that 13-year tenure, was trying to manage the growth. I mean, managing downside sometimes is easier than managing success. And because success breeds opportunity, but opportunity breeds distraction. And so making sure that we stayed focused on the biggest opportunities and didn't get distracted by the multitude of opportunities was a pretty challenging environment sometimes, which is great. I mean, they're great problems to have. When you have an extra $1 billion to spend in resources, that's great. Trying to make sure you spend it in the right place so that you get the return that you need to have. That's the hard part.
Yeah. So let me drill down a little bit. We have a lot of marketing students in this audience. So you and I have spoken before about transition Nike made in marketing from TV to online. I'm old, so I grew up on the awesome TV ads that Nike had. I think in this audience before, I asked, it's an embarrassing raise of hands of how many people remembered Mars Blackman. Remember that? Mars Blackman, that. Anybody? Anybody know Mars Blackman? Yeah, see, the two old guys raise their hands. It was a great ad campaign that Nike ran with Michael Jordan.
Spike Lee and Michael Jordan.
Yeah, so Spike Lee played a character named Mars Blackman. So what was that transition? In some ways, to me, through those TV ads, you really invented the sports celebrity commercial. How did you shift to the online environment?
Well, I think, how did we shift is we made mistakes. Ultimately, the good news is we figured out that they were mistakes at the time we made them. We didn't think they were. I think one of the things that what Dave's referring to is, that, and you can look at different industries and different kind of transition curves. And we were pretty much on the front end of the digital world, and not because we were smarter necessarily, but because our target audience is the 14 to 17-year-old kid. And so we started to feel the impact of the digitization of social culture sooner than if you ran a law firm, or if you were in the accounting business, or some of the different, or even if you're selling cars for that matter, or ran an airline. And so we started to really feel that change, and I always tell a couple of different stories on when, and just to illustrate when and where. One of the biggest ones was, I think, in 2006. We ran a campaign at the World Cup. So it's the biggest global sporting event in the world, and more people watch it, more people are engaged in it. If you live in Brazil or live in Holland, the passion is something you very, very rarely see in places like the United States. But we ran a campaign with a company called MySpace. How many people remember MySpace? Right? So it was kind of a precursor to Facebook. It was one of the early social media movers. I think Murdoch ended up buying it, and I think it disappeared within three years. Facebook came in, completely changed that game and rewrote that rule book. But at the time, it was very innovative. It was an independent platform, and we partnered with them around our World Cup campaign, where consumers could go in and we fed content to kids, and they created their own pages, they created their own videos, all this different stuff. We used athletes, we used part of the advertising itself. They could cut and paste all these different things. And it was really the first time we engaged in a user experience on a global basis. It was very, very innovative at the time. And it was 2006. And by the time we got to the World Cup final, we had over 1 million kids I think the average time on a website at the time was like 45 seconds. And we had over 1 million kids with average engagement levels of over 20 minutes. And so it was, I mean, in the advertising world, it was earth-shaking. And I think incredibly powerful. But as naive as we were, we didn't know what to do with it. And at the time, organizationally, we were set up. Our marketing department marketed the brand, and so they focused on the calendar, the seasonal sports calendar. For the U.S., the fall was football, the winter was basketball, and the spring was baseball, and we'd shuffle in a little bit of tennis and whatever. And in Europe, winter, spring was all around football or soccer. And so we finished the World Cup, and we took all of our high-powered marketing talent, which had created this campaign and created this relationship with MySpace and with over 1 million kids around the world who were soccer crazy kids, and we took those guys and we took everybody and said, okay, it's time to work on the NBA. It's Michael Jordan, it's Kobe Bryant, whatever. LeBron was starting up. And we literally left 1.2 million kids hanging. We didn't shut anything down, but we quit delivering new content. We quit listening to them, and we quit talking and conversing with them. And boy, did we get some blowback. It was, the outrage that we heard and felt was like, you do this great stuff, and then you literally walk away from it. And it was not only eye-opening, it was deafening if you were in that world and in that environment. And we really got shocked. We said, hey, we can't do this. We built all this consumer loyalty and brand loyalty, and then we've just come out and completely disappointed them. And that was when we said, you know what, we have to redesign and reorganize the company so that we don't do this, because it's a non-negotiable point. So we literally reorganized the entire company worldwide. It took us 18 months to do it, and that's as fast as we possibly could have done it, because we said, this is the new world. This is what we have to do, and we had to move quickly. And for us, 18 months in today's world is forever, and there's a lot of companies that just couldn't make that transition. That have not been able to make that transition from analog to to digital. And an interesting one right now, which is happening, is Walmart, and they were the biggest company in the world, for about 10 years, and then this little startup called Amazon came around. And now Walmart has started to respond. It's really interesting to watch what's going on in that space. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about leadership. You said before about the importance of being in the game, and you shared an experience about a campaign you ran after Tiger Woods' personal life blew up, and Tiger Woods was essentially identified with Nike at that point, or vice versa. And you felt that you could not address the issue. And your boss maybe had a little bit of a different thought about that. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Well, it's interesting. Here we sit, 8 years later, and Tiger Woods has kind of recreated himself, and he's reinvented himself, and he's now probably as endearing as an athlete as he may have been since he was 17-year-old phenom. It's the comeback story, and it's getting his act together and his life together, and going through what a lot of people go through. Everybody's even the most iconic athlete in the world is still just a human being, and so what Dave's referring to, and I told this story I think last time we did this session. So everything had come unglued and everything had gone sideways, and he was going to play in the Masters, and he hadn't played for almost a year at the time, and and it was probably the biggest single sporting event of the year. It was his return to golf, and it was at the Masters where he'd had so much success, and yet, he had not proven to the world that, he'd actually recovered in this thing. And so we felt like we were compelled to take advantage of the opportunity of the moment. I think one of the great things about the Nike brand is that we always really prioritize taking advantage of the moment, whether we could prepare for it or we had to literally react to it. And I'm sure we'll talk about the latest moment that we've reacted to.
That's coming.
Yeah. But in this case, with Tiger's, situation, we said to the ad guys, we said, we've got to do something that we can't act like nothing's wrong or nothing's happened or nothing. We have to address it. And they really struggled to find the right tone and the right theme of the ad and everything else. And I still remember this day. I was in Shanghai, and they called me at it was about 6:00 at night, and we were leaving, or no, we had just gotten there, and they said, and they had to have the ad done by probably like 3:00 in the morning my time to make the time slot. This is like Tuesday before the Masters starts on Thursday, and they called and they said, we're just not happy we can't get there. And I said, it's not an option. I said, that's not an answer. We can't do that. And I said, you got to go back and tell them to keep at it. You got to come back at it. And so at about 6:00, maybe 5:30 in the morning, I get a phone call, and it's the ad guys, and they're very excited. And they says, I think we've got it. And it was the voiceover of Tiger's dad talking to Tiger. And so I called the guys in the office. I had to go over to our Shanghai office at like 6:00 in the morning, and they piped the ad to me, and we saw the ad. And it was going to be controversial. It was definitely going to, you were either going to love it or you were going to say, how dare you, right? It sounds kind of familiar right now. And anyway, so I called Knight. I figured I better cover my tracks on this one a little bit, just in case it blew up in my face. But I called him and I said, hey, I need you to see this ad, and I need you to see it now because it's got to go in like at noon. And I got a hold of him. And so he says, what do you think? And I said, I think it's great. I like it. I think it's gonna definitely, hit a nerve. But he says, and he said this to me probably 5 or 6 times during my career. He says, okay. He says, if everybody likes it, I'm going to take credit for it. He says, but if this thing blows up, it's all your fault. And I said, okay, fair enough. And so we ran the ad. It was controversial. It was, it was somewhat of, and Tiger was on board. He knew he had to kind of address, the elephant in the room. And it was, it goes on into the category of, another one of those iconic Nike ads that was done, in the old format, which was the TV, the analog TV format. But that's what Dave's referring to when he talks about the Tiger Woods ad.
Go on the interwebs. It's a phenomenal ad. You should watch it. It's a black and white ad. You just see Tiger's face. And as Charlie talked about, the voiceover of it is of his father. It's 30 seconds or so. It's a very powerful ad. But I wanted to talk about that to set up for the elephant in the room we can't not talk about, right? So you left Nike 4 years ago, but what I want to talk about the Kaepernick ad is, from your experience there, so Nike is at this point a huge company. So what can you tell us about some of the reasoning that obviously occurred throughout the company and executive decision making before that ad actually ran?
Mm-hmm. Well, so first of all, I think, so how many people have seen the latest Nike ad? Oh, good. Okay.
Had its intended impact, didn't it?
So at least everybody's informed on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I guess first of all, I'll say I'm very proud of them running the ad. I have nothing to do with it. I'm just like you guys. I'm on the outside looking in, maybe a little bit of historical perspective. But I think Nike as a company they've had a rough 18 months. They've done a lot of things that I'm not very proud of. They've had some real issues around equal rights, male-female situations. They let go of a significant piece of the management team, and they've had some real, cultural problems inside, and nothing to be proud of at all, in many ways, and quite disappointing, in fact, in many ways. But so that climate being very sensitive internally at Nike, I think the external world doesn't, have that same perspective, which is understandable. For them to take the courage to run an ad like this under those circumstances is even more, I think, impressive for me personally. What's been really interesting is, again, that's a, Nike took a point of view in a political climate that is very hypersensitive. I mean, we're literally 8 weeks before the midterm elections, and the political world is starting to really spool up. And the country's struggling right now as a collective. I mean, it's probably more of a divisive climate in this country today than it has been in maybe 20 or 30 years, maybe more. Which is, it is what it is, right? Yeah. And so, we all collectively have to work our way back towards the middle to get to some common ground on a variety of different, subjects. But for them to take a stand like they did, I thought was really good. From a business standpoint, it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, they might have spent $10 million producing an ad. They got over $250 million of awareness time. I mean, so from a plain business standpoint, the exponential exposure that they've received it's easily justifiable from that point. I don't know if you've seen it, but for the weekend after they ran the ad, when it was at its peak of probably conversation, the online sales were up over 40%. And so, their target audience responded very, very well, from a pure business standpoint. Will it be sustainable? Will it not? How many people will burn shoes? How many people will buy shoes? And the debate will rage, and it'll go down in the marketing classes of the world, for the next 5 years on, was it a good idea or a bad idea? I think what's so great about the campaign is that it's going to be part of a marketing discussion for the next 5 years. And that, billions and billions and billions of dollars are spent annually on marketing and advertising, and you might remember one or two things. Right. And so and I think the most important thing that it achieved is it created a conversation. And you had to either like it or dislike it. And I think what has now, since the ad has been out and the campaign's been out and all the PR stuff, and now we've had a chance to kind of digest it, and some of the positioning has kind of settled it a little bit. The thing that I find most interesting in the campaign was not something that I found interesting in the first couple of days, which was the controversy of, should you take Colin's point of view or should you not? What I've found is the difference in the generations and the way that they've interpreted it. Dave remembers, and Doug was here too. My son was here last time I was here. Today he's 17, and as a 17-year-old, incredibly well more informed than I was as a 17-year-old. I mean, he can't afford not to be. But when we showed him the ad, he's aware of the Kaepernick positioning and everything else. But it was very interesting. He says, "Well, that's a Nike ad. That's what Nike does. And it didn't have the impact on him, which is exactly what you don't want. You don't want to be the anticipated, for us, or at least for my generation, who is, hypersensitive about the political environment that we live in and everything else. I saw it as a much different animal. He says, well, that's just like the ad they ran last year. I went, really? So again, being able to listen, to the different points of view, the different interpretations, whether it's cultural, whether it's generational, whether it's geography, whether whatever it might be, that's what creates the interest. And so in this case, even for the 17-year-old, it might not have created the type of interest that I would have liked to have seen from him. It also continued to reinforce and highlight that the way I see the world is different than the way he sees the world. And if you're engaged in a consumer brand today, you better have the ability to sensitize that.
That's great. I know we have questions from the audience, so we've got mics. Raise your hand.
So my name's Levi. So a question I have for you: you started off as like an assistant store manager in Portland, and then you eventually became the CEO of the company.
Just the brand president, not CEO.
Oh, just the brand president. Yeah. Okay, just the brand president.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll remember that. My question for you is what were the attributes and what were the things that you did that allowed you to make that big of a jump, starting so low in a company to becoming eventually a brand president?
Well, I think first of all, I started in a small company, so I grew with the company. It wasn't like I came in and the company was $23 billion, and I went from being an assistant store manager to running the global enterprise. So I was fortunate enough to be, I was along for the ride, at some level, right? I mean, as they say, the tides in the bay, all the boats were rising. So, but I think, and it's funny, I've had this conversation with so many times, so many people, including Phil Knight, and I've heard him talk about it on why he put me in that job. One of the things that I found out well, there's a couple things. For me personally, as I was presented opportunities from a career standpoint, somewhere along the way, the light went off that I needed to kind of have a little bit of a checklist for me personally to be able to check off to say this was the right opportunity. And it really came down to like 2 or 3 things. And one was, am I going to learn something new? Or am I just doing more of what I've been doing? So that was one box. Second was, am I well enough prepared for this new opportunity to be successful? So it's good to get a new opportunity doing something different, but not if you're not prepared, because you don't always get a second chance. And so sometimes I turned down some opportunities where I just didn't feel confident enough that I could jump into that environment or that job or that role or whatever, or that situation or whatever it may be, that I really could be successful. And then the third and final one was, do I like the people around it? Am I going to be able to collaborate? Am I going to be able to, work with people? Are they good people or are they not good people? And I turned jobs down that were great jobs because I didn't feel confident about either the manager or the group or whatever. So those were my 3 kind of and don't tell me where I figured that out or ask me, because it just kind of over time collectively kind of appeared. And as I got later into my career in the bigger and bigger jobs, that became kind of my little emotional checklist for me to put up against. I think that the other thing that for me personally, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I don't want to be, quite frankly. I'd rather be the dumbest guy in the room, quite frankly, because if as a manager, or as a leader, you can tap into the resources that you work with, that is where you get to someplace new. If you think you have to do everything and you think you have to come up with the next destination all on your own, you're compromising 95% of your tools. And so for me, I always tried to put. I mean, I loved hiring people smarter than me, which wasn't too tough to do. But that's what, for me, because I could learn from them. And I think one of my biggest successes, as we grew the business, from 9 to 23 or whatever it was continuing to take advantage of all the intellectual and creative capacities that. I mean, Nike has an incredible amount of people that are just unbelievable. I mean, I sit in awe in every room, every meeting, from artists to designers to accountants to, marketing people. It's intimidating at times. But then to have that type of resource pool available, it's a real sin not to be able to take advantage of it. And so that was probably my biggest, I guess, gift, was the ability to, pull those resources together in a collective that got us to different places. Yeah.
My name is Weston Hyde. I don't know if this is on, but I'm a marketing major, senior up here at Utah State. Very important question, but who is your all-time dream team, starting 5 basketball players? I'm just been dying to know, so I'm really curious.
Well, I always get asked that type of question one way or the other. So, I mean, I had the fortunate opportunity to work with some unbelievable people. I mean, whether it's in the world of basketball, Kobe, Michael, LeBron, Kevin Durant, Charles Barkley, all those guys. It's funny because people ask me that, but they ask, sometimes they ask you that from a perspective of who were the greatest players, on the court, and I don't engage in that debate because you can't win it. And quite frankly, each of them played in different eras and different, circumstances, different times. But what I do say is the ones that, what makes them special, what makes them different, and it's not just in basketball. You see it across the board. I mean, whether it's Tiger Woods or Lance Armstrong, Michael Jordan, whatever. They all have this, Roger Federer, Serena Williams. I mean, they are all unbelievably alike in a couple of very, very specific ways. They have this insatiable desire and curiosity to figure out how to do it a little bit better. It's insatiable. It's just in their DNA. I mean, Michael's competitiveness is legendary. Tiger, Kobe. I mean, they just will themselves to a place where they're just not going to lose, and then they're going to figure out how to do that. And that unique, you don't see that at the level that they possess it, but when you see it, you go, they're different. Because when you get to the professional level of sport, athletically, physically, there's a lot more parity than you think. There's a lot more, they're all phenomenal athletes. They're physical freaks. I mean, LeBron is a freak of nature, physically. I mean, he's 6'8", 275 pounds, 2% body fat, and can do anything and everything you can think of better than you can. It's just, but he has this God-given talent, and then he has, a brain and a heart to go with it, and that's the difference. There's 30 freaks in the NBA, maybe 50, but they don't have what he has upstairs and inside. And that's what those guys. That's what all. I mean, Serena's the same way. I mean, look what she's a freak. I mean, she's ridiculous. for a woman to do what she's done athletically is almost uncomparable. Anybody. So that's what they, when people ask that question, that's where I go. That's what creates something special when you look at athletes and that's what they all possess the same thing. They're unbelievably unique in that way. And we one time we had when we thought Phil was going to retire, which he still hasn't retired even though he says he has. But we had a big party deal for him, and we flew 40 of the greatest Nike athletes of all time in. Michael Jordan, Cristiano Ronaldo, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Carmelo Anthony were 19 at the time. So they'd literally just been drafted. Mia Hamm, Alberto. I mean, across every, Pete Sampras was there. And we were all sitting in the green room. I mean, you talk about an impressive green room. And so Kobe looks around. We're sitting there, and Kobe looks around and says to me, he says, man, this is the most unbelievable green room I've ever been in. So even at the time, who's the striker at Manchester United? Wayne Rooney. He was like 18 years old. He took pictures with every single athlete. He was, but they all appreciate and respect each other at a level that's unbelievable. I mean, it's just, but they're all so similar in so many ways, and yet they're totally unique. So this is the way I answer the question. That way I don't get in trouble with anybody.
That's great. I think we're way over time. Last question. You've got the mic.
Yeah. Okay. So this is one that I feel like we're all thinking. Nike's kind of like the goal for a lot of us business students. I'm a marketing major myself. We can't all just like start as an associate manager in a company before it blows up. It's obviously huge now. What would be your, I guess, advice to us on how to get in now and like make our mark at a company like Nike where it's already huge?
Well, I think getting into a big company, there's pluses and minuses to big companies. I mean, they have great resources. They have it's a great environment. There's so much knowledge that you can be a sponge around and learn from, and that's a huge advantage. There's also lots of people, very competitive. Most companies are very political. Just the nature of the beast. So you have to have your eyes wide open going in. That I think in today's world, I mean, it's hard to find people with 35-year careers with the same company, for good reason. In today's world, I think today's world things are changing so fast. It's hard to justify staying in one place. In some cases, in other cases, and I think it's purely individual, it's personal. If you find that it's enjoyable, you find that it's enlightening, you find that it's, that you're earning the money that you want to earn and that you're doing what you like to do. At the end of the day, you got to be passionate about what you want to do, and you got to enjoy the people you're working with, and you got to be comfortable with the amount of money you're making. And if you can attain those things, it doesn't really matter where you're at. It doesn't matter if you're at Nike or if you're at a little startup in Logan, Utah. Because, when Nike was a startup in Eugene, Oregon, nobody knew it was going to be what Nike was. And so it's totally an individual perspective. There's a lot of pluses to working in big companies. I would always encourage anybody and everybody to take a shot at it. It's right for some people. It's not right for others. It's a great experience either way, because of what what the exposure is. The flip side is in a startup or a smaller company where you literally have to do a lot of stuff. You're a faceted person in a smaller company. You may learn a lot more in a smaller company. You may because it's you and nobody else. And so, it's on the job training, and it's, survival of the fittest, and, there's no politics, there's nothing, external that you're having to deal with. And, and I had the advantage, or not the advantage, I had the opportunity to grow through both of those phases. when I started at Nike, you got it in a job, you did it all. There was, there was no secretaries and no assistants and, whatever you were doing, you had to do, it was a small company. So I kind of survived both environments, so to speak. But I think everybody should leave as many doors open as you can all the time. Because being in charge of your own destiny is better than having somebody else in charge of it. Yeah.
That's a great sentiment to end on. So thank you for staying late, and thank you, Charlie, for coming to visit.
Sorry for late.